Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Lavander, and I'm the director of the USC Center for Health Journalism, which is based at the Annenberg School of Journalism. We're delighted to welcome you to this conversation about our 2023 Data Fellowship. We're really here to talk to you about what you can get out of the fellowship, how it can increase your skills and really bring you to a new level as a reporter, and how incorporating data into your reporting where it's guiding the stories that you do rather than an afterthought where you just go for that hunt before deadline for a statistic where you're coming up with original findings is going to really up your game. And so we're going to hear today from MaryJo Webster, who is the data editor of the Star Tribune. She's one of the senior fellows or mentors we have in the program. We have 4 mentors who are going to be working with approximately 20 reporters who will be in this program. It's a competitive program, and you will get one-on-one mentoring. You will get a week-long instruction. You'll get a level of attention to really help you go beyond just like taking a one-time course and then kind of easy to forget it after that. The idea is that we work with you over 5 months so that these concepts and skills really stay with you. And we're also going to hear from 2 former participants in the program, Stephanie Kuzadine and Kylan Jackson. Stephanie is the sports enterprise reporter at the Louisville Courier-Journal, and Kylan is the metro reporter at the Star Tribune. I also just wanted to encourage you to think early about applying for this program and to let you know of an opportunity that we can afford you, not only to have a kind of mentoring call with MaryJo and some of our other senior fellows, but also to get started on thinking about what data you need and how to get it. And so those senior fellows, even before you've been admitted to the program, are willing to help you with basically, thinking through what data set you need to get. So you could put in a FOIA request or a PRA request months before the program even starts so that you're really ready to go once the program starts. I want to introduce you to a few other folks quickly. Jackie Stenson is our manager of projects, and she's the first conversation you'll have if you want to reach out to us about your application. We strongly encourage you to do that. Jackie, did you want to say a quick word?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. As she mentioned, I'm typically the first point of contact for journalists who are interested in our fellowship programs, and I'm available to answer your questions and to meet with you individually over Zoom or on a call to discuss your project proposals. We, in fact, recommend these consultations before folks apply so that you can get a good sense of how our programs work and whether your proposal is a good fit. I also would be the person who would refer you to a senior fellow, so please reach out. I'm going to put our interest form in the chat, and you can fill that out to set up an appointment with me. I'll also put my email there, and you can reach me that way. Thank you.
And I'll just say it's really important for this program of ours to connect with us ahead of time, because you may have a project idea that can make for a fabulous project, but there may not be a data set that corresponds to that, a big public data set. That's not a dead end. We've sometimes worked with reporters to create data sets, but you'll want to have that conversation with us so that you know if your project could really be viable for the program. Also want to quickly introduce Cassie Garibay. She's our engagement editor, and she can say a quick word about that opportunity.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm the California engagement editor, and we'll also have a national engagement editor. In addition to the data fellowship, selected applicants can apply for an additional engagement grant of up to $2,000, and that would also come with mentorship from one of the engagement editors. Stephanie would be able to kind of speak to what it's like to be both a data and engagement fellow, and there's been some really impactful journalism that comes out of incorporating both data and community engagement. I'm also available for a conversation if you have any questions about what community engagement is or how to incorporate it into your project. And I can put my information in the chat.
Thank you, Cassie. And just to walk you all through our time together, we're going to hear first from MaryJo. She's going to provide an overview. Then we're going to hear from Stephanie and Kylan about their experiences, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to MaryJo.
Thank you so much. Let me get my screen share going. Okay, so we'll try to give you some advice here on how you can really make sure your application is good and that you have a great project in the works. So as just real quick recap, as Michelle said, there's a training in Los Angeles in October, and then we will have monthly sessions where we will have additional training, and then you will also be meeting with your senior fellow at least once a month, possibly more, depending on what you need. And this is unlike a lot of other data programs in that we do have that, we help you get a project out the door with your new data skills. And that really will boost your data skills so much faster than taking a class for a few days and walking away. As Jackie mentioned, she's your first stop, so start with her. And then you will be asked to meet with one of us ahead of time. We have, this is super important, and it will really help you with your application. We can help you refine that pitch. We're going to ask you questions as if we're your editor. We can help you draft a public records request. We can help you, help you try to figure out where to go find data, those kinds of things. And it's a great conversation, and I know it really is helpful to you in the long run. So to set up those times to meet with one of us. The senior fellows this year, in addition to myself, are Christian McDonald is a professor at the University of Austin, of Texas in Austin. He's formerly a data journalist at the Austin American-Statesman. Andrew Bautran is an investigative data journalist at the Washington Post. And Alvin Chang is a professor at the New School in New York and formerly the data team leader at the Guardian. Stellar bunch here. And in addition, at those training sessions, both in LA and the monthly virtual sessions, we bring in many other highly regarded data journalists. It's really a who's who group. And so you'll learn from some of the best. The stories that come out of this program are, health is the underlying theme, but health covers a lot of ground. And there are some things we need to, some topic areas that we stick within, but even just looking at these headlines here, you can see there's a lot of diversity. And these are just a few from the last few years. So you want to look real carefully at the main data fellowship page. It describes these topic areas. For those of you in California, those should focus on how community conditions influence health and well-being. And if you go to that page, there's a very long list of example kind of things that you can lean into. And then the national fellows, anyone from outside of California, but in the US, should focus on child health and well-being. And again, there's a long list. So take a look at that. When you have that meeting with the senior fellow and or talking with Jackie, you can help narrow that down as well and help you understand those areas. So what makes a good application? So number one, meet that priority area, obviously. But the bottom line really is you have a compelling story idea and the potential for community impact. Like, could this result in some change? Could it result in a law being changed or a policy being changed or somebody's lives being improved? But the other thing that you need to think about is that you want a story that will benefit from data analysis or possibly even be impossible to tell without it. And you need to have identified suitable and accessible data. And this is one of the hard things to do. There's this tricky line here that you're on, because you're coming to this program to learn about data, but you might not know how to go find that data before you've done the learning. But we need you to be sure you have some data that you can truly get. So that's a little bit of what we're going to cover today, is to try to help you with that. And those conversations with the senior fellows are super crucial in helping you with that as well. And then, of course, make sure your editors and producers have buy-in on this and are going to give you the time to work on it, because you really can't hit a home run without the time putting in the practice in order to get a home run someday. So some of the things that I look at when we get project proposals coming in, I look for answers to questions like this, and the more clear you can make it in your proposal, the easier it is for us to evaluate your proposal. So what is that core thesis? What is it you're trying to prove? Or what question or questions are you trying to answer? Who will this story hold accountable? So like, is this a government agency? Is this maybe it's a business or a nonprofit, but who that is? How would you like to see the community benefit from this, or what kind of impact you might want to see from it? And then some of that reporting that you've already done. So quick implication here, we want you to do some reporting. You obviously don't need to do all of it, but have some idea of what the idea is going to be, what you make sure it's somewhat viable, but then also tell us what reporting you haven't done yet, or what challenges you face. And quite often it is the data that's the challenge. Is like, I know there's data out there, but I don't know how to work with it to get the answers out of it that I need. So tell us that in the project proposal. And then what are the sources you're going to tap to prove this? And that includes the data. And I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. And then why is this story important to do right now in this time and place? Is there something timely about it or newsworthy, like why now? That's always important in any type of story that you do, even beyond this fellowship, right? So let's talk about data a little bit. So typically, a good story where you're going to put data analysis skills to use is one where the numbers that you need, or the pattern you want to reveal, like somebody hasn't already dug that up themselves. Somebody hasn't already put it out there. And data might be the only way you can get that. And one of the things you want to think about is think of data as a source that you are going to interview. So the more breadth of knowledge that the data has, the better that source is going to be for your interview and all the questions that you're going to ask that data. And typically with data, we frame, we have questions that measure things, right? Has something gotten better or worse over time? Is it better here versus there? How much money has been spent on, or how often has something happened, right? These are the kind of questions we often use with data analysis. And in your proposal, this is the kind of framing you want to think about to help you frame your story. So let's talk about what kind of data you might want to be looking for. As journalists, we use a lot of data like this. This is from pre-pandemic times, total people in Minnesota that were hospitalized with the flu in a given week, and then it shows what it was last week, and it shows total hospitalizations to date over the course of that flu season. Now, this is technically not data, actually. A lot of us think it is, but it's summarized information that has been gleaned from data somewhere. Somebody has a data set with every hospital admission for flu, including when they were admitted and when they were let out and all of that. Imagine all of that data back there. This piece of information here, we can't ask it very many questions because there's so little information here, right? Now we could go up a level. This is what is known as summary data. This is flu hospitalizations by county of residence and the season. So now we can see a little pattern over time. We can see some geography, but again, we don't know anything about these people. We don't know their race, their gender, their age. Are they children? Are they elderly? There's a lot of questions we can't answer with this data. So again, this data doesn't have the breadth of knowledge. Maybe it doesn't have the breadth of knowledge that you might need for such a story. So you have to think about that. Most often what you want to aim for is the most detailed data you can possibly get. So let me go back here, the hospitalizations. What if we could, and this is a tough one to get, but what if we could get all those hospitalization records, and maybe it doesn't have names, but it has gender and race and age and when they came into the hospital, when they left, if they died, that kind of thing. All of that would allow us to ask a lot of different questions. So you want to aim for something like that. And this is a data set one of my fellows used a few years ago. These are violations in rental properties in Los Angeles. And each row is a violation, and it tells where it occurred and when it occurred, and there's a description and a type of violation. So there's a lot of pieces of detail there that it's not telling us anything summary here. It's not telling us how many violations there were, like expressly, but we could use it to get that answer. And that's the thing you want to aim for. So how do you find a good data source? People ask me this all the time. They're like, what websites do you use? There is none. There is no one place to go. And really, you just put your reporter hat on, and you start calling people and treat it just like you would a human source. How do I find the right source in the situation? And I can guarantee if you start calling the humans who know about the topic you'll want to write about, they're going to know what the data sources are. And that might be a government agency or somebody who has the data you want. It might be an academic who's written a paper about it, or maybe they've used that government data set. It could, all kinds of different people who maybe know where to point you to. Look at the methodology section in reports. Look at the footnotes in government reports where they give you those high level numbers, like the flu hospitalizations, right? Where did they get that from? A lot of data is online these days. However, do not assume that that is the only thing they have. I can guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, what they've put online is a fraction of what they actually have. So use that as a starting point and then dig deeper. Private companies and nonprofits, which includes a lot of hospitals, unfortunately, are probably not going to give you data. You're probably going to have to rely on government entities that are subject to public records laws. And so that's where you're going to have to start. You may see that researchers have gotten access to data and you think, oh, cool, I could get that same data. Sometimes they get special permission to access data that might have some privacy restrictions around it typically, and they might have better access than you can ever get. Try to get a phone call with a data person at whatever agency it is that might have that data, and start asking them some questions. Make sure you have a good grasp on what you think the data would look like if you were to put in a request, and get them to help you frame what that request maybe should ask for. I had a fellow last year put in a data request before the program started, and he had assumptions about what he was going to get. And 5 months later, he did not get what he assumed he was going to get. And instead, he got something that he really couldn't use. It was way too summarized. And I don't think he had this conversation ahead of time and really said, okay, is this going to show, what is each row going to be? And then you also want to know, is there anything that you're not going to give me if I asked for it, that it's private or non-public under the public records law? And try to get a list of what fields of information it will include, or ask them for a record layout. So this is a little small slice of a record layout, and what it should show would be what the column is called and what it means, what is contained in that column. And any agency should be able to provide you something like this. I have seen some of them be a little wonky with it, but ask for it and see if that can get you an understanding of what you're going to get. I'll give you an example. We encounter this a lot, where you ask for something and you think, oh, it's going to have all these great things in it, and maybe it doesn't. So one of my fellows last year, also, she asked for mobile home park inspection records, and she got the data. But you would think, okay, an inspection record, you would think it would have the address, right? No, the records came no address for the park, just the name of the park. They also refused to provide a narrative of what they found in the inspection because it would take too much long doing the redactions. By the time she learned all this, we were far enough into the program that the time, just the clock was going to run out on her and they wouldn't provide it fast enough. She also got complaint data, and that data did not indicate if the agency actually acted on the complaint. It was just what the complaint was, and that was it. And she didn't know this going in. She didn't have this conversation with the agency and really drill down. She worked around it. She still did a really great project. And you will encounter situations like this where the data doesn't come exactly the way you want. And there are ways around it to still get a great story, but it's better to know this ahead of time rather than when you're in the middle of it. So some other questions to ask that agency: what does each row represent? The universe, how many years of data can I get? How current is it? What does it include? What does it not include? Have a good understanding of what's there. And then make sure you can get it in, the term you want to use is machine readable format. Comment delimited Excel text file, a tab delimited text file, an Excel file. You do everything you can to avoid a PDF. I had a fellow a few years ago who had literally got all those rental inspection records I showed you. Originally that came as a PDF with literally 10,000 pages in a PDF. He was able to go back and have them give him an Excel file later, but you avoid that upfront. And then, will it cost you any money? How quickly can you get the data? And this is crucial for the fellowship. You don't need to have your data in hand at the time of the application, but we really want you to have it by that time we're in Los Angeles in October, or the week or two after that. So you're really talking October, having that in your hand. So if you have an agency that says it's going to take 4 or 5 months to get you the data, you kind of got to get your FOIA request in like now, real fast. So good to know. Stephanie's going to talk about, it is possible to do a data story by building your own data. We've had fellows do it in nearly every year. I think there's one. We've had fellows conduct a survey. Sometimes it's transferring information from paper records or PDF. Or in Stephanie's case, collecting data from different places and putting it all together because nobody else has put it together before. So that is also an option. And one other thing that you should talk about with when you have that conversation with your senior fellow is to talk about the scope of this data and what format it might be coming in, and what you're thinking about doing. In this training, we're going to teach, you can choose to either learn Excel or R, which is a programming language, but we don't teach things like using geographic information system data, like a GIS software. So if you want to do something that is very, very like, I want to look at geographic patterns of X, Y, or Z, it might not work very well with the fellowship too, because it's not a skill we're going to teach you. And a key thing here is that we want to teach you a skill and have you use that skill and put it to use, because that's how you solidify your skill. So sometimes there's going to be data sets that are over your head, and we don't want you to have a disaster on your hands. We want you to have an achievable project here that is a success story in the end. So we will also think about that skill level needed for whatever data set you might be eyeing up. And we'll talk about that. Do some of that prep work that you normally do, vetting your idea ahead of time, and to come in with the best possible thing. So let's flip it over. I think Michelle's got some questions for our former fellows.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, and also just so you know, there's a few questions in the Q&A that we could come to later, some really good questions. So yeah, I'm just going to turn to Stephanie and ask you, basically, you have talked to us before about how you were carrying around for something like 10 years, a list of what you called the boys who died of football. This was a story you desperately wanted to do as you went through different jobs and different parts of your career. So what did you just quickly set out to do, and what did you accomplish with your project?
Sure. I set out to show that there's a lack of health and safety on high school sidelines. And that's exactly what we did by gathering data, by creating databases I think one of the very first conversations MaryJo and I really had, like a longer one sitting down in LA, was like, here's this database that I've kind of self-created on my own of these boys who have died, these athletes who have died over the past however long I've had the records, dating back however far. How do I clean this up? Like I'm creating my own thing, and I'm just kind of like throwing information into columns in Excel. What columns do you think are missing? How do you think it should be better organized? And so we really started with that and found that there were a couple sections that I was missing, and then I just kept refining it over the last 7 months before I published, to really refine it to then be able to turn around and be a digestible format for everything that people would need. So Safer Sidelines is definitely something that I got, like Cassie said earlier, I was a data as well as a community engagement fellow, and it came out of both, and like both of those things are the reason that Safer Sidelines made it to be published, because of I had to engage. I ended up engaging with a lot of athletic trainers and a lot of families who have nonprofits of athletes who have died, that helped create the initial database of athletes who have died. So we ended up calling it the Deadly Games database, but yeah, originally when I started it 8 years ago, it was called The Boys Who Died of Football. So,
And Stephanie, you you had seen a lot of coverage that was kind of one-off coverage, like a kid would die tragically, it would appear in the local paper, and then everybody would move on with their lives. And as you said, some families started foundations and so on to honor their children. But what did data allow you to do in this project to elevate the issue and its importance, and to really, to do something beyond those one-off stories?
totally. It allowed me to help gather, like MaryJo said, like the universe, and then put it into something that nobody had ever created before. So what you're seeing right now is, on the right, it's me literally going line by line in a PDF because it was not produced any other way. And this was the easiest way for me to do it, because it wasn't big enough, was to go line by line and pull something out of one PDF and add it into this thing that you see on the left, which is a database I self-created. And this database on the left is what ended up becoming a searchable database. So we started with that. It's, sorry, MaryJo, can you go back one real quick? So it starts with, these are schools in Kentucky. And I talked with my senior fellow, which was Alvin, and I put more into this database than you can search on the back end, because we wanted to make sure that I had every base covered if I wanted to create it into a map. So that's why you'll see the lat long. If I wanted to make it searchable by its NCES, every school has a specific code. And so we added a ton of data in the back end while I was sifting through every single website. So it was a fluid kind of system. So that way I wasn't going back almost like I did with the Deadly Games database, being like, what data actually should I have added into it? So this is how it started. And then it turned into, you can go to the next slide, please. It turned into, these are all the schools in folder form. So I sent out a records request to every single school asking for what is known as a venue-specific emergency action plan. And Alvin and I came up with the best way to do this is whatever it's named in that first slide, it gets named here. So it's by high school and then county, because some of the counties had multiple schools. And then it turned into this database that you see on the right with all of the different colors, which is, we sat with a emergency response plan expert who then went through and took the plan versus the law and helped us create a database that shows whether or not schools in Kentucky are following to the letter of the law, this law that is intended to create a plan to save athletes if an emergency happens.
And it's basically to have certain kinds of equipment and certain kinds of CPR training and elements like that. You know, for some reason, I don't know if it's because of how I have my screen. Let me see. I'm not seeing the finished database. I don't know.
It's the next slide.
Oh, great, great, great.
Sorry, it turned into that. So this is, if you've seen the whole time, Adair County is the very top one. And so this is obviously not coded with all the colors. That was to help me. A lot of people don't like colors. The colors really, really help me navigate what I'm looking at, what I'm missing, especially with 280 high schools, which actually compared to other states isn't that much. And then the final thing was you could click on the blue Adair County High School and it would populate everything that you needed to know about your school. If you're a parent and you're saying, hey, what's going on with my kid's school? You could click and you could find everything. So it was we created 4 databases and you could search 3 of them here because the Deadly Games database was a completely separate one.
And how did the training and the mentorship that comes with the data fellowship help you?
Can you go to the next slide, please, MJ? It literally changed my whole career. I've never taken on anything like this. And to sit here on the other side is so much fun to know that like I was empowered with tools and support that I'd never had previously. Like you said, I tried doing this project again and again and again. I had done it in little bits and pieces, like a trickle effect. I did do about 200 stories on the topic at a previous job, but to pull it off in one big lump sum and say, here, like, look at this issue, that's what this data fellowship and the engagement fellowship helped me do. And so this is literally my entire fellowship in one self-made database. This is what Alvin and I call the work back tracker. He helped me kind of build it, gave me some examples. And what it is just everything I needed to get done that week and color coding it. It wasn't always all green. It's green because I finally would move things forward and switch it. So red means, you know, it's not happening, get rid of it. Yellow is we're hanging on, and green was like, yay, keep going. We completed this. So that literally was just one more step in like, okay, cool. This is how we move little bits and pieces. I've said this before, but a friend of mine says like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And this is what this is. Like, how do you take on a massive data project when you're terrified of the word data? Like literally I was terrified of it. It's one step at a time. It was one box at a time. Just get one more task done to help me move forward.
And how did this impact what you can do as a journalist now?
Sure. Next slide, please. So this is the impact of just the initial, like we ran it on our website, the Courier Journal, in paper, and then we ended up getting, I think, 5 opinion columns from different experts across the nation that really helped drive the conversation nationally. If you can go to the next slide too, please. And then this is more of what the community engagement helped me do. So it empowered me to, like I said, reach out to all these families. And standing in both of these slides, it's the same person, is Matt Mangine Sr. It's a dad of Matthew Mangine Jr. And his son died in June 2020. And he was willing to be the parent who spoke for a lot of my coverage. And then we ended up holding the left is a panel discussion that we had about a month after the project came out to say, okay, now we know what's happening here in Kentucky and nationally, like how do we move forward? So we had a state legislator, a state commissioner, a sport association commissioner, a parent, and then an educator come and talk to a group about how we move it forward. And then on the right is actually Mr. Mangine. On Sunday, the foundation, his son's foundation, had an event, and he pulled up Safer Sidelines during the event to show everybody, because it was parents of not, you know, parents who don't know in the room, to help them learn about really what is going on. So it's cool to see. It's a slow trickle effect, I would say. I thought like the next day it would be like, bam, tweets everywhere. And it's been slow, but it's been amazing. And I'm fine as long as it keeps going, that it's, you know, trickling out there. So.
And Stephanie, for you, you mentioned to me when we spoke the other day that there's no data desk at your paper. And so you're now a hot ticket, right, in the newsroom. And are you using these data skills now?
Yeah, I went from the sudden death of athletes to sudden death of horses. It's been a headline. The Kentucky Derby runs out of Churchill Downs here in Louisville, and there were actually 13 horses that died in a 5-week span. And so I have now started creating my own databases for a lot of different things that I'm looking at in horse racing that don't exist anywhere. And so every time I go to somebody and I say, hey, what about this? They say, you're gonna have to build it. You have to figure that out. And so I am not at all like that is like, okay, come on, let's go. Like I can do this now. So I have 3 different databases currently that I'm building.
That's very exciting. One last question, Stephanie, and then I'm really looking forward to hearing from Kylan as well, which is to talk a little bit about engagement. And as Stephanie has mentioned, her work really is an example. And I would say this is a smaller percentage of the work that our data fellows are doing, but a really important one where there's no public agency asking this question and collecting the data in this way. And it seems to me that your engagement work, at least in part, I think it did things beyond that, but one benefit it served was to help you build that database. And maybe you could talk about some of the other things you did as well with the trainer.
Yeah, totally. So the engagement portion of it helped me take what I was trying to do as a journalist and say, hey, I can't do it all. If you're willing to help me, please help me. And so we created ATAT, Athletic Trainer Advisory Team, and that's athletic trainers nationally who came in and interacted with me to help me make sure that the deaths that I had in their state were accurate, that I had them. If I had ones that were missing, they got added. If I needed to know about laws, they helped me learn about those laws, especially with Damar Hamlin happening in January, put everything in warp speed and threw a bunch of bills out there. And I couldn't keep track of everything. I actually had a really hard time with it. And so to have these athletic trainers say like, yep, no worries, we got you covered in our state. If anything happens, we'll update you, was a huge, like, okay, I can focus on what I need to focus on. And then when this comes in over here, I'll look at it. And then we pivoted on that as well, because in January, I was invited to attend a conference of parents who have lost their children. And I realized that I was missing the very voice that I needed for this story, which is those who have been lost, and those who are speaking for them, which is mostly their parents. And so Maya helped me engage with all of these nonprofits and ask them for their stories. So we actually did a triple engagement. We did the ATAT, we did these nonprofits, and then we ended up having this community forum. So it was huge. It changed it from just being like, hey, this is a problem, to like, hey, help me learn more about the problem, what I don't know, and then like let's try and talk about this problem and solve it together.
And I'm going to turn to Kylan in a minute, but just to clarify, my recollection is that you built a network of 26 trainers in 50 states, and that when you're talking about nonprofits, you're talking about the nonprofits started by the families of the kids who died.
Yeah, it's more than 26 at this point, but I don't remember the latest count, but it's up there. And I get more people telling me every day, which is really cool. Like, hey, if you need any help, I'll join the team. And yes, the nonprofits are those nonprofits of parents who have lost their children to sudden death in sport.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So we're going to turn to Kylan, who was doing his project for the local PBS affiliate when he got going. And Kylan, and he's now at the Star Tribune. Kylan, you set out to explore a really obscure provision of Medicaid, the program that provides healthcare for low-income people. Tell us what you set out to quantify on how the program was stripping families of intergenerational wealth in Minnesota, but in other states as well.
Sure. So I had been following some of this story about a year or so before I started at the local PBS affiliate in Minnesota. I had actually caught on to it from an article in The Atlantic who did a similar story, looking at a family whose house was about to be claimed because of essentially old Medicaid bills from their deceased family members. And that was coming back on them in terms of, or translating to their house being forfeited or to their house possibly being reclaimed by the state. So going into the project, I wanted to see how that translates to Minnesota, when Minnesota counties are affected, what the demographics of people who are affected might be, the socioeconomic status, and just in general, what some of the stories of people who are affected by this are. So going into it, it was a lot of kind of finding the right people to talk to. I ended up contacting the National, I believe it was Association of Elder Law Attorneys, who helped to connect me with some victims from Medicaid estate claims who were essentially fighting the state to try and keep their homes. So you'll see the pictures here are actually people who were affected by that. In the top left corner is Kevin White. His mom was essentially dying of, I believe it was diabetes and cancer at the time. And eventually when she passed, the Medicaid estate claim came in the form of a bill that he either had to pay or the state would say that his mother's house, his family's house, would be claimed by the state in order to compensate the overdue bills that she had incurred just from medication, from trying to get her diabetes and her condition taken care of. So going into this project, I was just trying to see what counties are affected, how deep is it in certain counties as opposed to others, and started to find that there's a through line that a lot of the people who are affected are poor, cannot afford to pay for the bills that Medicaid claims are coming to compensate for or coming to claim, and that people who might be wealthier and might be having those claims put on their families as well are also able to circumvent it through just hiring attorneys to fight out of it, through finding loopholes in the system. Essentially, it's a federal program that has a lot of loopholes that can be exploited and that is wreaking havoc for poorer families in states everywhere. So I went out to find that, and yeah, I was able to really show how deeply it affected people, even going as far as to say what the average income was for some counties and some areas who were having estate claims made on them.
And you've already kind of partly answered this, but my next question was going to be how the data analysis you did helped you say something different than just an anecdotal story.
Right, and exactly like you said, it's giving, or I used that data to give me a story of who the people were who were being affected by the program. So we found that, as I mentioned, a lot of people were poor, had an average income that was, in a lot of cases, just below the federal poverty level or at the federal poverty level. We were also able to use the data to map it and to see what counties there are. So even in this picture in the top right, where you see estate recovery totals, we were able to make that a clickable database that shows the data of each county in terms of how much it recovered within those years between 2014 and 2021, how many estate claims there actually were, so that you can kind of give an average of each estate claim equaling this amount for that county in that time period. And it essentially just became a tool for people to look into their own counties, into their own areas, and see how deep of an issue is this for people who are living here, especially in some rural counties in Minnesota. There's a lot of families who are dealing with this who, when I talked to them, thought that they were on an island or thought that they were one of the few that were affected by this. The data helped me to show that it's not just them, and that a lot of the money that's recovered makes little to nothing. We named it pennies on the dollar because that was a quote from one of the state, I believe the state data person who I talked to do this. And they had mentioned that estate recovery claims recover like 1% or less than 1% of what the state actually spends on the long-term care services for some of the people who incur these Medicaid bills. So we were able to show that not only is this affecting a lot of people in a lot of different counties, but also that the data shows that it has little to no return to the state.
but quite devastating, obviously, to these families. Thank you. That's a great summary. And I believe you work with Christian McDonald, who's the data guru at University of Texas at Austin. He's going to be serving as a senior fellow again this year. And how did the training here in LA and the mentoring from Christian help you with your project?
The mentoring and the training was pivotal. It was crucial, I think, to a lot of what I did. I had done some data reporting before, even some mapping, but Christian's work, his mentorship, and the mentorship from others at the program really helped me to get this across the finish line. Going into the project, it was one of the biggest that I had taken on. So kind of like Stephanie mentioned with data being scary, projects were scary for me. Taking on a huge project with not an immediate deadline was kind of terrifying. Christian really helped me to break it down and to give it kind of like Stephanie had just more achievable goals within a timeline to get it to where I needed to be. He also helped me to ask the right questions, to try and find some of the data sources for where I can look to really quantify what's going on, and to help clean the data and tell the story in a correct way. Also, one of the best pieces of advice I got as I was going along came from MaryJo, in terms of asking for a line item of just the data request that was made after we had done so. Because when we had first made the data request, the cost came out to, I believe, 2,000 or maybe 3,000. It was exorbitant. And so one of the advice, or the piece of advice that she had given, was just to ask for a line item, ask for them to break down how the costs were being divvied up and where there could be like just some costs that could be cut down from there. And after that, we got it brought down to well below the actual grant that we had that I'd asked for to do the project. So we were able to get all of the data that we were looking for. So all of that mentorship advice really helped me to get the project to become what I had envisioned it to be. Especially after seeing the Atlantic article, I wanted to really quantify and see how this affects not just one family, as they did in their article, but to show how it affects multiple families across Minnesota and how deep that could be.
Thank you. One last question, then we're going to turn to all of you. How did this, what kind of impact did this have for you as a journalist?
It impacted me in terms of, it was a confidence builder. We mentioned like the fear that came into doing projects and into tackling a lot of the huge data sets that are involved with them. And that fear kind of, at least before then, was really numbing, or was very, would keep me in one place to where I didn't want to engage because of the fear involved in it. But doing this helped me to really see that these kind of goals, these kind of huge projects that I'd like to take on are achievable. And also recentered me to remember that the people are a lot of the focus of the story. A lot of the people I talked to, Kevin White, I believe her name was Jane, that I have in the lower right corner, are folks who mentioned that they thought they were on an island, who didn't really realize that the issues they were facing affected a lot of people. And they mentioned to me afterwards how much how thankful they were for their story being put out there, just because of starting those conversations with their neighbors, starting those conversations with people who they had known or who they had worked with, who didn't even realize that their homes were on risk of being forfeit, or that the state was coming to claim something that they had had in their family for generations and had planned to pass on. So the project and the fellowship in general really gave me a lot of the data skills, a lot of the investigative reporting skills, a lot of the journalistic skills that I had been really craving, and helped me to achieve those in a way that I can look back and say, this is a project that I have achieved. I can do many more things like this. It makes everything else seem much easier. And I honestly think it's a lot of the reason why I am where I am now. Before doing this project, I was planning to stay at PBS for a while to kind of lean into this maybe and see where I can go. But this really opened my eyes to just the amount of skill building that I could do, and to how much more I could achieve. And eventually I was here working with MaryJo after the fact. So it has helped me to grow leaps and bounds.
Thank you so much. So we're going to turn now. Thank you to all three of you for these really great presentations. We're going to turn now to your questions. I think we'll start out with some of the ones in the Q&A, and feel free to enter stuff there. And then if we have time, we can actually call on some of you. We have a question from Larissa Lynch, who says, how do you get past the PIO to find the person in charge of the database? And what do you call that person? And I would just say, and I'll turn it over to MaryJo, that often the PIO is the intermediary, and sometimes they can connect you to the data person, but you might have some other things you want to add on that front, MaryJo.
Well, my best tip is to use some data language that scares the PIO so badly that they want to run away and get out of the middle. And that's one of the things, the conversation with the senior fellow, we can help you with. We can help give you some language to use, some very data specific terminology and questions that if you throw it at the PIO, that you could convince them to move beyond. You can also tell them really that you want to make this process easy for them and for you. And talking to an intermediary is probably, it's going to be like talking to a translator, and something's going to get lost in the middle. And it's going to end up being a bad process for them and for you. And they're not going to want that. I've had very good luck with a lot of my state agencies in asking for a phone conversation or a video meeting even with the people who actually work with the data, the people who is the person who would fill your request if you submitted one tomorrow. And it saves a ton of headache and confusion down the road. And you keep pushing on that idea and some of the terminology, and hopefully you can get past the PIO. There's times you can't, and then we'll figure out what to do from there.
And also, I just do encourage you to take advantage of this kind of, I don't know, gift in a way that we're offering all of you, to take that coaching ahead of time. So even if you don't get admitted into the data fellowship, you'll get advice on putting in a good public records request. And either way, you're better off. And MaryJo had mentioned to me before that, for example, one of our fellows had a great project idea, but left out a few things in the public records request that sort of slowed him down later. So just that kind of thing, just to get another ear on stuff you might not have thought of. We had a great question earlier, and I typed a reply, but I wasn't sure if that was seen by others. And that question was, how are you able to get a good grasp of the data and what it might look like before seeing it? Isn't that part of the discovery and the reporting process? And so I had mentioned this trick that Sarah Cohen had said, which is to FOIA the forms that deal with your topic so you can see all the fields and get a better sense of what you can get. But MaryJo, you might have some other suggestions as well.
Yeah, so if it's a data set that literally is built by somebody filling out a paper form, ask for those paper forms so you can see what is going into the data set. I also showed you that example of a record layout. What is contained in this data set, and what of this is public or not public. And then that third technique is getting those data people on the phone and having conversations with them. And don't be afraid to say, here's what I'm hoping to do with it. If you're thinking, oh, I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing, it's an investigative project kind of thing, it's going to bite you later. It's better to be upfront with them about what you want to do, and they'll, hopefully that agency will be more forthright and want to be helpful to you. So it's and it is about asking a lot of questions and trying to get someone to tell you everything they know about that data set. That's how you find out as much as you can.
We have a question from Miriam Vidal. If I have a previous grasp on Python, can I have some mentorship about it? You know, right now we're not doing Python, we're doing R. But that's, you know, what we've done is evolve this program from just having one catch-all track to adding different tracks as we saw who applied. I would say, Miriam and others in this spot, you know, go ahead and apply, and it could be there's more than one path to analyze your data, more than one tool. But MaryJo, do you want to add to that?
I'm pretty sure all of the fellows right now, we all mainly use R, but it's possible one of them also knows Python. So that, as Michelle said, put your application in and we'll see what we can do. I honestly am not certain about the other fellows if they know Python. I don't know Python, but we would like to try to help you in whatever way we can. We're very passionate about making sure other journalists have data skills, going forward. So give it a try.
Yeah, I have this vague recollection that Andrew might know it, but I could be wrong. But yeah, but
Yeah.
go ahead, because it could be that there's another way to analyze the data with one of the tools we are teaching. And if not, we can come up with a plan B if that looks like a good way forward. And Marie Cunningham asked if we can make the PowerPoint available. We'll be sharing this PowerPoint on our website and we can mail it to all of you. Laura Farrar asked, can we have more than one pitch to present to see which one might be more viable? I think that's a great idea, and we encourage you to do that. And then Farah Otero Ahmad said, what is the timeline to complete the fellowship and the start end date? So the program is in October, and I can't remember, I think is it the 16th, MaryJo? Your first slide had the dates on.
The week of the 16th, yes.
Yeah, I think it's like the 16th to the 19th. And then it's just 5 months out from there is the deadline. So that would be
mid-March.
Mid-March of 2024, your project needs to be done. And even though 5 months might seem like a really long time, it goes fast. And so that's why you saw those back out schedules that Stephanie had, and heard Kylan talking about how he worked with Christian on that too, because time management is a really important part of all this too. And we have, ongoing discussions about that too. And sometimes you have to have a plan B. You're not going to get the data you want, or the data you get isn't in the format you want. So that's also a part of the mentorship that we provide of how do you come up with a project that's viable, even if everything you had dreamed of getting doesn't come through, which is probably most cases. Yeah. So I think that I'm done with the questions here. Let me just see if there's anything in the chat. No, I suppose we could see if anybody wants to raise a hand and we could call on you if there's some other questions.
I don't know if they can do that in here.
They should. There's a raise hand.
Oh, okay.
It's at the bottom of your screen and you just hit that and we'll see it and we could ask you to speak out.
Just quickly, Michelle, there's another question that came up in the Q&A.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, at the bottom from Chantal Riley. Is this fellowship for people who are already data journalists? This is a great question. And what level of skill should we have before we apply? So no, the whole point of this is to help turn you into a data journalist and to add this to your toolkit. But we also serve people who have some data skills and have done some data analysis. So we basically right now are dividing folks into 3 tracks. And one is beginner Excel, the other is intermediate Excel, and then the third is RStudio, which is more of a programming environment. And the beginner Excel, we do want you to have some skills, like you should have done something with the database before, even if you're just using it to record lists or something. Like if you've never, ever touched a spreadsheet, you might need to be a little more advanced to be in the beginner track. I don't know if MaryJo, you wanted to add something to that.
I would actually disagree. I think it's okay if you have, maybe you've touched Excel in some form or fashion. Government agencies send you a file and you look at it and you sort it maybe, but you really don't know how to analyze data in there. That is okay. The intermediate track is where you would be somebody who's been using Excel. You feel like you could do pivot tables, but maybe you haven't done anything beyond that and you really don't feel 100% comfortable doing stuff on your own. And then the R programming languages, it does tend to be people who feel like they've maxed out on Excel, or they know that the data set that they're going to get is too big for Excel and they need something a little more powerful. And that there could be people who might technically be data journalists who come for that R training, but almost everybody we get is reporters who just want to boost their skills in some form or fashion. And we're trying to meet you where you are as much as we possibly can.
Okay, and in any other questions or clarifications? I feel like, let's see how many people we have left, 46. We're practically like a classroom size. I don't know if they have the ability to unmute themselves.
I don't think so.
This format, but like I said, if you raise your hand, we can look for that. Not seeing any raised hands. But, just know that, we'll be sending you this presentation, this recording, and posting it on our website. And also that, Jackie is here to talk to you about your overarching project. Cassie can talk to you about engagement. And then they in turn will be funneling all of you. I see we have one more question. They will be funneling all of you to the senior fellows for this, for this kind of more in-depth conversation about, what you're trying to do. And maybe as you reach out to us, just think about what is the question that you want your data to answer? What are you hoping to find out that you can't know right now from just like interviewing 5 people or something like that? Like, what will knowing what 100 people did or 1,000 people did or more help you to do? And that's a good starting point. Sometimes we find, not so much for our data fellowship or some other programs, where people say things like, I'm going to use data and I'm going to use all these data sets, but they don't define the question. And so one of our data mentors says, think of data as if it were a human source that you're interviewing. So what would you want to ask the data is a good starting point. But just don't be shy about reaching out to Jackie, and she can connect you with our data senior fellows. So I want to thank all of you for your time, and I especially want to thank MaryJo, Stephanie, and Kyland. I want to thank all of the folks who joined us today for your great questions, and we hope to see your applications.